She turned down the $1 million deal that tried to win her back years down the road.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, you know, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
Revenge doesn't always come with noise or fury. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through a single choice that changes everything. For Caitlin Clark, payback didn't mean clapping back online or calling anyone out in interviews. Her revenge was silent, but absolutely crushing. She said one word: no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn's legacy, and no to the $1 million deal that came crawling back years later. On paper, it sounded insane, turning down over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball. But this wasn't just another offer. It was a lifeline from the same man who once dismissed her, doubted her, and treated her like she'd never be enough. When Caitlin turned it down, she didn't just reject the money. She humbled the man who thought he'd never be humbled.
That's the worst part about new fans. You know, they have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
This was never just about stats, not the points, the assists, or even the trophies. It was about power. For years, Geno Auriemma stood as the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the man who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who disappeared into the shadows. But Caitlin Clark changed that narrative completely. She didn't chase his approval, his program, or his paycheck. She built her own empire from the ground up without him. And when he finally came knocking, she didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence said it all. I don't need you. You need me. Every revenge story begins with a single mistake, and Geno's wasn't a bad play or a bad timeout. It was arrogance. Blinding, unchecked arrogance. Before Caitlin Clark became the face of women's basketball, before the sold-out arenas and record-breaking TV ratings, she was just a kid with a dream, and back then, she believed UConn was the coolest place in the world.
What does bother me is some of the people I deeply respect, their basketball credentials, their basketball history, their commitment to basketball and women's basketball, I think have really not covered themselves in glory with some of this commentary.
The dynasty, the empire, the home of Taurasi, Moore, and Stewart, the mountaintop of women's basketball. For a young girl growing up in Iowa, nothing loomed larger than UConn. So when recruiting season rolled around, the path seemed crystal clear. The most electrifying prospect of her generation joining forces with the greatest recruiter the sport had ever seen. But that call never came. Geno Auriemma never picked up the phone, never reached out to Caitlin Clark, never even contacted her parents. Just a vague message passed through her AAU coach. For a man known as the master of recruiting, that silence spoke volumes. And make no mistake, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The message was loud and clear. She wasn't a priority. His excuse? UConn already had Paige Buchers and he didn't want 2-point guards. On paper, fine. But what came next turned a snub into an insult. Geno claimed that if Clark really wanted to be a Husky, she should have called him. Think about that. The same coach who built his legend on identifying once-in-a-generation players before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, and then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss, it was pure disrespect.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart.
It was the kind of slight that sticks with you, the kind you never forget. Caitlin Clark didn't respond with anger, she just stored it away. If Geno Auriemma didn't believe in her, she'd find a place that did. So she chose Iowa, a program without UConn's banners or mystique. To outsiders, it looked like settling, but to Clark, it was freedom. At Iowa, she wasn't living in Paige Buchers' shadow. She wasn't an afterthought to Geno's empire. She was the recruit, the centerpiece, the future, the one everything revolved around. And from the moment she stepped onto the court in Iowa City, she changed everything. Those logo threes weren't just shots, they were statements. The sold-out arenas weren't coincidences, they were proof. And those record-shattering TV numbers, they were receipts. Every basket, every viral moment, every milestone screamed the same message. You missed this. Meanwhile, Geno doubled down. Instead of humility, he clung to arrogance. He dismissed her with smug remarks. calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. But what he refused to see is what everyone else already knew. Ordinary players don't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary players don't pull the WNBA into the mainstream. Caitlin Clark was never ordinary, and she made sure the whole world knew it.
This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. And she's a rookie.
And that's where the irony hits hardest. Geno Auriemma was the one who shut the door when Caitlin Clark came knocking. He thought she'd fade into the background, just another talented player who never quite made it. Instead, she went on to build the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen, and she did it without him. When Geno finally came back around, contract in hand, Clark didn't lash out or celebrate. She didn't need to. She simply said one word, no. And that single word cost him more than any championship defeat ever could. But Geno couldn't let it go. Every time Caitlin's name surfaced, he found a way to drag her into another comparison with Paige Buchers. If Clark was fearless, he reminded everyone that Paige was too. If Clark connected with fans, he'd mention that Paige had done the same. It wasn't coincidence, it was calculated. By tying Clark's success to his own players, Geno kept himself in the story. He wanted people to believe her rise wasn't new, that it was just another reflection of the dynasty he created. But those subtle jabs started to backfire. The fans saw it, the analysts saw it, even other coaches saw it, and they all realized Caitlin Clark didn't need Geno's name to shine. She'd already become bigger than his legacy.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP at the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
People started to see right through him. Caitlin Clark's greatness didn't need excuses or comparisons. It spoke for itself. She was pulling in bigger crowds than most pro teams, smashing records the sport had never witnessed, and completely redefining what women's basketball could be. Yet there was Geno Auriemma, smiling for the cameras, pretending everything was fine, while quietly clinging to the throne he felt slipping away. Beneath the charm was fear, the kind that settles in when the spotlight starts shifting, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And eventually the mask came off. The subtle jabs stopped being enough. Geno went from undermining Clark to outright attacking the people who supported her. For months, he hid behind slick commentary, using shade as strategy. But in June 2024, during an interview on the Dan Patrick Show, he went too far and crossed a line he could never take back. The Hall of Fame coach, once seen as the face of women's basketball, didn't just criticize Caitlin. He turned on her fans. He called her supporters delusional, claimed they didn't understand the game, and unbelievably said they were actually hurting women's basketball. That wasn't commentary anymore. That was desperation.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
What was their crime? Believing Caitlin Clark could finish top 4 in MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno Auriemma, that wasn't passion, it was ignorance. And as Diana Taurasi bluntly put it, this kid's in for a rude awakening. But think about what was really happening. Millions of new fans had just discovered women's basketball because of Clark. Families were showing up wearing her jersey. Kids were lining up outside arenas just to catch a glimpse. Casual viewers were tuning into WNBA games for the first time in their lives. And instead of celebrating that moment, instead of welcoming this surge of excitement and attention, Geno chose to mock it. His words weren't analysis. They weren't thoughtful critiques. They were personal, aimed not just at Clark, but at the people who believed in her. The same fans who had carried women's basketball into the national spotlight. By dismissing them, Geno wasn't just questioning Clark's supporters. He was questioning her. He was saying the hype wasn't real, that the success wouldn't last. And because he's Geno Auriemma, a voice that still carries weight in the game, those words cut even deeper. They weren't just condescending, they were revealing.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
He was convinced time would prove him right, but here's where the story gets poetic. Geno Auriemma wasn't right, not even close. Caitlin Clark didn't respond with tweets or interviews. She didn't need to. Her answer came where it mattered most, on the court, and what unfolded wasn't just validation, it was the complete destruction of Geno's credibility. Clark went out and claimed Rookie of the Year, then she leveled up, earning a spot on the All-WNBA first team, and when the MVP votes finally came in, she finished exactly 4th, right where her so-called delusional fans said she would. The very prediction Geno mocked became reality, and with it, his authority collapsed. This wasn't just a victory for Caitlin Clark, it was a triumph for every fan he ridiculed, every parent who brought their kid to see her, every casual viewer who tuned in for the first time. The people he dismissed ended up being right all along.
And you see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side, where, you know, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Every new fan who jumped on the Caitlin Clark wave, Geno Auriemma wrote them off as part of the problem, but Clark proved they were ahead of their time. And the best part, she didn't need to say a single word. No drama, no clapbacks, no interviews, just results. Night after night, she let her game do the talking. Logo threes that stunned crowds, crossovers that broke ankles, assists that belonged in highlight reels. By the time the awards rolled in, the conversation was over. She had silenced him without ever mentioning his name. And that's the poetry of it all. Geno had always positioned himself as the guardian of women's basketball, the all-knowing authority who supposedly understood the game better than fans. Better than the media, better than anyone. But this time, the fans were right. Clark was right, and Geno was dead wrong. Every sold-out arena, every shattered record, every headline was a reminder. He wasn't the kingmaker anymore. She didn't need him. She never did. The irony? Clark wasn't even trying to prove him wrong. She wasn't chasing his approval or thinking about him at all. She was just being Caitlin Clark, and that alone was enough to expose him, enough to humble him, enough to show the world that his reign was over. By the end of her rookie season, the question wasn't whether Clark had lived up to the hype, it was how completely she had crushed every doubt. Geno's words didn't age well, they spoiled fast. His comments about her fans went down as some of the worst takes in sports history, bitter, insecure, and embarrassingly wrong. But Geno couldn't move on. Being wrong was something he just couldn't handle. And at this point, it wasn't even about Clark's game. It was about what she symbolized, a power shift, a new era, the undeniable truth that women's basketball no longer revolved around him. Instead of accepting that, he did what he always does. He kept talking, interview after interview, podcast after podcast, her name never far from his lips. Each time, the same routine, a sprinkle of praise, a subtle dig, a compliment laced with shade. But the more he talked, the clearer it became. Caitlin Clark wasn't just rewriting history, she was living rent-free in Geno Auriemma's head. Eventually, words stopped working. After all the shade, the comparisons, the dismissive remarks, nothing stuck. Clark kept winning, and Geno kept fading. So he tried a new play. If he couldn't control the narrative with his words, maybe he could do it with money. That's when the $1 million offer entered the picture. By then, Geno had exhausted every trick. He ignored her as a teen, dismissed her rise, mocked her fans, tried to spin her fame as a product of UConn's legacy. None of it worked. Caitlin Clark kept rising, and Geno Auriemma kept disappearing into her shadow.